The unilateral action that the Trump administration has taken today against every nation in the world does not come as a surprise. For Australia, these tariffs are not unexpected, but let me be clear, they are totally unwarranted.
That was PM Anthony Albanese responding to Donald Trump's global tariff plan 3 months ago. Well, Trump hit pause shortly after that, but that pause on the tariffs is about to expire. So what happens now? Federal Politics editor Katina Curtis joins me to help figure that out. Katina, the PM has been urged to get a meeting with Trump to talk about these tariffs, which could be implemented any time. What do we know about whether or not a meeting will happen?
Well, we know that he's still trying to get one. They're trying to make their diaries line up. The PM, sort of about a week ago, the word was, we're trying to get something as soon as we possibly can. There was chatter about maybe going to the White House in fairly short order. The PM's language on this has changed slightly over the past week. He's now talking, and it did again this morning, about, Donald Trump and I will be at all these different summits together in the sort of the back part of the year, and there'll be plenty of chances to meet, and no one needs to be worried about this. So it certainly doesn't look like, he's going to head to a meeting in the next week or two before Parliament resumes. But he is saying, there's plenty of chances to talk, and that relationship's still fine, nothing to worry about.
And so, but what is happening with the tariffs then? Do we know anything more about it, when they might be implemented, and what is being said in government circles about the concern around that?
Yes, so July 9 is the day that that 90-day pause that you mentioned ends, and the tariffs come into play. Now, there already are those large tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. The ones that we're talking about on July 9 are the so-called Independence Day tariffs, Liberation Day tariffs, that were across the board. Australia is facing 10%, which looks very much like that's the baseline. Certainly no one who's struck a deal with the US has gone below that 10%. Donald Trump has been making deals. He landed one with Vietnam just earlier this week, but even they didn't. I think they are still looking at probably a 20% tariff on their exports to the US. So, no one seems to have got nothing. Anthony Albanese said this morning that basically the government's not too worried about that July 9 stuff. He said, he said like 10% seems to be the lowest. We've got the best deal. The other thing the government has been saying to me is that basically like we'll have a comparative advantage. For example, if Australian wines going in face a 10%, consumers have to pay 10% more on those, but they have to pay 20 or 25% on like French wines or Canadian wines or something, then, Australia's products are comparatively better off. So they're not too worried about that. The other approach from the government is very much thinking about this is they say, when we struck the free trade deal with the US, which was under John Howard about 20 years ago now, Australia made compromises at that time, and we're really not willing to compromise further, but especially if we're not actually going to get a good deal out of it.
Yeah, I think that's all very interesting points to make. Like, why would you compromise on things like biosecurity on imports that could be potentially catastrophic for our own agricultural industry, especially when you're facing a situation where every country has copped tariffs. You've got the lowest of any tariffs, and with everybody getting tariffs, it doesn't really change the import market into America, and potentially there are some advantages to be had if your product has less tariffs than it does from coming from, say, France or Taiwan or China or wherever else it might be that haven't been able to negotiate. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of incentive for Albanese to rush into a meeting with Trump on that basis. But is it possible that he could potentially just get him on the blower for a chat?
Yeah, I think they'd be trying to do that as well. And, it's still a valid way. Certainly Trump seems to be, he's always talking about everyone wants to talk to me, everyone wants to get me on the phone. So I think they'll probably be trying to set up a call like that. Again, it's sort of not such an easy thing at this leader-to-leader level when you're trying to have a formal conversation, where you nut out some of these issues or tensions in the relationship. It's got to be, have advisors and be all organised properly. You can't just kind of pick up the phone and say, hey, mate, what are you up to on the weekend? So I imagine that's trying to be in the works as well. And you'd think that they might talk and then perhaps announce a meeting date after that, if it's going to be a sort of a big meeting or a state visit, White House visit, something like that.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. And July 9 is not very far away at all, so we won't have to wait too long. Federal Politics editor Katina Curtis in Canberra. Thanks, as always, for joining me on the show.
Thanks, Ben.